It is a cruel joke when the only way to survive is by becoming someone you're not. And yet, it is even crueler when the one person who sees through you is the only one you wish would believe in you. The day I walked into the Beaumont estate, I wasn't supposed to exist. My name wasn't written in their history, my blood wasn't their blood, and my claim was nothing but a desperate lie. But I was tired. Tired of being hunted, tired of being treated like dirt in a country that promised freedom but left me gasping for air in its shadows. So when the chance came to slip into the shoes of the Beaumont's rumored lost heir, I took it. The truth? I didn't want wealth. I wanted escape. But I didn't plan on him. Ethan Beaumont, the true heir, the boy they thought was gone, who stood in front of me like a ghost resurrected, blonde hair catching the sun, eyes the color of blue steel, sharp, relentless, almost cruel in their clarity. He was the kind of boy who carried the weight of legacy on his shoulders and wore it like armor. And God help me, from the moment his eyes met mine, my chest tightened with something I hadn't felt in years. The Beaumont estate loomed around me, all white pillars and heavy curtains, a mausoleum of money and power. They greeted me like a miracle, the prodigal son who had returned at last. I played the part, bowing my head just enough, telling stories I had stitched together from scraps overheard in bars and whispered rumors. I didn't stumble. I didn't break. For a moment, I almost believed it myself. But Ethan didn't. He cornered me on the third night, in the library that smelled of old books and wood polish. He leaned against the desk, arms crossed, watching me with a predator's patience. "You don't belong here," he said simply, as though it were fact carved into stone. I should have denied it, should have laughed it off. Instead, I met his gaze and whispered, "Maybe not, but does anyone in this family, really?" The words hung in the air between us. His jaw tightened, but something flickered in his eyes. A crack in the perfect armor. That was the first night I realized that Ethan, the real heir, wasn't as invincible as he wanted the world to believe. And God help me, that weakness made me want him even more. The days stretched into weeks. I lived a lie under the Beaumont roof, but the lie gave me shelter, gave me air to breathe. Ethan shadowed me everywhere, suspicion dripping from his every glance. He watched how I held the silverware, how I greeted the staff, how I looked at the old photographs hanging on the walls. He wanted me to slip. He wanted proof. But here's the cruel twist. The more he searched for my lies, the more he revealed his own truths. One evening, after a suffocating dinner where his aunt praised me for my Beaumont posture, Ethan pulled me outside. The night was humid, the cicadas loud, the stars stubbornly clear above us. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "To survive," I said. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." His silence cut deeper than any accusation. But then his hand brushed mine, accidental maybe, but lingering. Heat shot through me, sharp and undeniable. And in that moment, I realized the most dangerous part of pretending wasn't the risk of being exposed. It was the risk of wanting him. Ethan Beaumont, the boy who hated me, the boy who could destroy me with a word, he was the only one who made me feel alive. But love, like lies, is dangerous, and the walls of the Beaumont estate had ears sharper than knives. The cicadas screamed louder than my own heartbeat. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The lanterns in the garden flickered, and Ethan stood so still he could have been carved from marble. I should have walked away. That was the smart thing. But when you spend your whole life running, the cruelest temptation is standing still. Especially when someone like Ethan is standing there with you. "You're lying," he said finally, his voice low, almost gentle. "But you're not lying about everything." I swallowed, forcing myself to keep my chin up. "What makes you so sure?" His lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile, wasn't quite a sneer. Because lies are neat. Yours aren't. They're messy. They sound like someone who's desperate, not calculated. For a moment, I wanted to laugh. Desperate was exactly what I was. Desperate enough to step into a life that wasn't mine. Desperate enough to risk it all for a roof and a bed and the hope of disappearing from the ghosts that followed me. But what I hadn't been prepared for was him. "You don't know me," I whispered. "You're right," he said, taking a step closer. His shoes crunched against the gravel. "And that's exactly what I don't like. Everyone else here, I know their games, their masks. But you," his eyes softened in a way that made my stomach knot. "You're the wrong kind of mystery." My breath caught. I hated how easily he disarmed me. I hated that he could see through the cracks I worked so hard to seal. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Ethan tilted his head, his blonde hair catching the lantern light. He was close enough now that I could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. The truth. The truth. God, if only it were that simple. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake in the ornate guest room, staring at the ceiling plastered with gold leaf that glittered in the dark. The house felt suffocating, its walls whispering with history I didn't own. And yet, I couldn't stop replaying Ethan's voice in my head. He wanted the truth, but the truth was a luxury I couldn't afford. By morning, I had buried the memory under layers of performance again. I smiled when his aunt fussed over me at breakfast. I let his uncle toast to the miracle of family restored. I pretended to belong. But Ethan didn't look at me once. And that, somehow, was worse than his suspicion. The days blurred into a rhythm I both craved and feared. Lessons in legacy, dinners with too many forks, long conversations about investments and philanthropy I barely understood. I wore the Beaumont name like a second skin, and with each passing day, it fit a little better. But Ethan was always there, circling me like a hawk, sometimes silent, sometimes sharp, always watching. I could feel his gaze even when his back was turned. One afternoon, I found him in the stables, brushing down one of the family's horses. He looked natural there, sleeves rolled, his hands steady, his movements sure. Nothing like the polished young heir everyone else saw at galas. "You ride?" he asked without looking up. I hesitated, then nodded. "A little. Not like you, though." He smirked faintly. "You say that like you know me." I opened my mouth to retort but stopped. The horse snorted softly, leaning into his touch. And for the first time I realized Ethan Beaumont wasn't just a name or an obstacle or a threat. He was flesh and bone, and quiet moments like this, where the world fell away and he was just a boy. Something in my chest cracked. "Teach me," I said before I could stop myself. He finally looked at me. His gaze was steady, piercing, but not cruel. After a long pause, he nodded. "Tomorrow, at dawn." That dawn changed everything. The mist rolled low over the fields, dew clinging to the grass like diamonds. Ethan was already there, waiting, 2 horses saddled. He handed me the reins of the smaller one, his fingers brushing mine in the exchange. The touch was brief, but it burned like fire. First, it was clumsy. I wasn't used to the rhythm, the weight of the animal beneath me. Ethan laughed. A sound I'd never heard from him before, soft and genuine, like sunlight breaking through clouds. "You're terrible at this," he teased. "And you're a terrible teacher," I shot back, grinning despite myself. For a few fleeting minutes, I forgot everything. The lies, the danger, the walls closing in. It was just the two of us, the sound of hooves pounding the earth, the wind in our hair. When we stopped, breathless, Ethan dismounted and came to my side. He steadied me as I slid down, his hand firm on my waist. Too close, far too close. Our eyes met. The world stilled. And I realized, with bone-deep certainty, that I didn't just want to survive anymore. I wanted him. But wanting was dangerous, because every step closer to Ethan was another step toward ruin. The staff started whispering when they saw us together too often. His aunt's smiles grew tighter. His uncle's eyes lingered on me with suspicion that mirrored Ethan's at the beginning. And still, I couldn't stay away. One evening, Ethan found me on the balcony, the city lights glowing in the distance. The air was thick with summer heat, cicadas humming in the trees. "You're playing with fire," he said quietly, stepping close enough that I could feel his breath against my cheek. "Then why are you here?" I asked. He hesitated. His hand lifted, almost touching me, before falling back to his side. His voice was raw when he answered, "Because I can't stay away either." It was the closest thing to a confession I had ever heard. And it was enough to undo me. That night I dreamed of him, his hands, his voice, the way his eyes softened when no one else was looking. I woke with my chest aching, my body trembling with something I didn't dare name. Because love wasn't part of the plan. Survival was. But maybe, just maybe, he was the only reason I wanted to survive at all. Secrets don't rot quietly. They bleed through the walls, seep into glances, drip from half-finished conversations. And in the Beaumont house, my secret was starting to poison everything. It began small. An offhand remark from his aunt about how I didn't hold my fork like a Beaumont, or the way one of the older cousins asked me about a childhood memory I couldn't possibly know. I smiled, I deflected, I lied. But lies are fragile things, and each day they grew thinner, stretched by the scrutiny of eyes too sharp to fool forever. The only thing worse than their suspicion was Ethan's silence. He didn't confront me again, not directly, but he watched. God, he always watched. Across the table, across the room, across the stable yard at dawn. His gaze was a weight pressing against me, demanding I confess. And sometimes, when we were alone, I almost did. Almost. But survival screamed louder than love. One night, the Beaumonts hosted a dinner for the city's elite. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter echoed, and the air smelled of money and old secrets. I played my part flawlessly, offering charming smiles, answering questions with rehearsed elegance. And then Ethan cut in. "So tell us," he said, voice smooth but eyes sharp. "What do you remember most about the summer house in Maine?" The table went silent. His aunt leaned in, curious. His uncle's brows arched. All eyes turned to me. My heart stuttered. I had never even heard of a summer house in Maine. But I couldn't falter. Not here. I forced a smile. "The ocean," I said softly. "How it looked at night. Like it swallowed the stars whole." For a moment there was silence. And then his aunt clapped her hands together, delighted. "Yes, that's exactly how your mother used to describe it." The table erupted in agreement, chatter moving on, laughter resuming. Relief washed through me, dizzying. But Ethan didn't smile. He just stared at me, his jaw clenched, as if I'd proven something he didn't want to believe. Later, after the guests had left and the house had quieted, I found him waiting for me on the balcony. His silhouette was carved by moonlight, broad shoulders tense, fists gripping the railing. "You're good," he said without turning. "Good at what?" I asked carefully. "Good at lying." I wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in my throat. He finally turned to me, his eyes blazing. "Why?" he demanded. "Why are you here? What are you running from?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came. The truth clawed at my throat, begging to be spoken, but fear sealed it shut. "I told you," I whispered instead, "to survive." He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him. His voice dropped, raw and broken. "Then what the hell am I supposed to do with this?" My breath caught. "With what?" "This," he snapped, his hand gesturing between us. "Whatever this is. This pull. This goddamn thing that won't let me stop thinking about you even when I know you don't belong here." The world tilted. My chest burned. And for the first time since stepping into the Beaumont estate, I felt naked. Not because of my lies, but because of how much I wanted him. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice cracking, "but you're not the only one." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating, alive. His hand lifted, hovered near my face, then finally cupped my cheek. His thumb brushed my skin, tender in a way that contradicted every ounce of his fury. And then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was desperate, furious, a collision of everything we'd been holding back. His mouth was fire against mine. His hand tangled in my hair, pulling me closer as if he could fuse me into him. I kissed him back with every ounce of hunger I'd buried, every fear, every lie. For a moment, nothing else existed. The estate, the whispers, the threat of exposure. There was only him. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathless, Ethan pressed his forehead against mine. "This will ruin us," he whispered. "Then let it," I breathed back. But ruin doesn't come in one blow. Seeps, it spreads, it waits. The days that followed were a dangerous blur. Stolen glances at breakfast, secret touches in the stables, whispered words in the dark of the hallways. Every moment with him was a lifeline, and every moment without him was suffocating. But the walls were closing in. His uncle's eyes followed me more closely. A letter arrived from some distant cousin, questioning the timing of my return. The staff whispered louder. And Ethan grew restless. Not because he doubted me anymore. He hadn't spoken of my lies since that night on the balcony. But because he was terrified. Not of me. For me. "They'll find out," he said one night. His arms tight around me as we lay tangled on the floor of the library, too reckless to care if anyone found us. "They'll destroy you." I buried my face in his chest. "Then I'll run." His grip tightened. "Not without me." The words pierced through me, sharp and dangerous. Promise, a vow, a threat. And I realized, with a shiver of both fear and hope, that I wasn't the only one willing to burn for this. But fate doesn't wait for love to ripen. It was at another dinner, a smaller one this time, just family, that the first stone cracked the glass. His uncle leaned back in his chair, sipping his wine with a sly smile. "Funny," he said casually, "how you've returned after all these years, and yet not one document, not one trace, almost as if you appeared out of thin air." The room went cold. His aunt frowned, confused. Ethan stiffened beside me, his jaw tightening. My fork slipped against the plate, the sound like a gunshot in the silence. "Careful," his uncle murmured, eyes glinting. "Wouldn't want to lose your composure." The table buzzed with tension, everyone too polite to say what they were thinking. Everyone except Ethan. "Enough," he said, his voice hard, protective in a way that sent a shiver down my spine. "He's one of us." The uncle raised a brow. "Is he? Or is he just the best actor this family has ever seen?" The words hung in the air, poisonous, undeniable. And for the first time, I knew the end was coming. The uncle's words were poison, and once spilled, poison spreads fast. I felt every eye in the room on me, sharp as knives. The chandelier above seemed too bright, the air too thick. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. Ethan's voice broke through the silence. "He's one of us," he repeated, steady, commanding. But his uncle only leaned back, lips curled in a smile that held no warmth. You're young, Ethan. You let your heart cloud your judgment. Families like ours don't survive on feelings. They survive on facts. The word facts clanged in my chest like a death bell. His aunt shifted uncomfortably, the cousins whispered, and the weight of their doubt pressed harder against my ribs. I opened my mouth, ready to spin another lie, to lace another mask over the cracks. But Ethan's hand touched mine under the table. A quiet, steady pressure. Don't. It was the smallest gesture, but it undid me, because for once I didn't want to lie. Not to him. But the truth could end me. That night, I slipped into the library long after the others had gone to bed. The fire had burned low, painting the walls with shadows. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window, trying to breathe. Survival had always been simple. Keep moving, keep lying, keep your heart locked away. But Ethan had broken that last rule, and now the whole game was collapsing around me. Tell me, a voice said behind me. I spun. Ethan stood in the doorway, his shirt loose, hair disheveled, eyes burning. He looked less like the heir to a dynasty and more like a boy on the edge of ruin. Tell you what? My voice was hoarse. The truth, he said, his fists clenched at his sides. Who you are, why you came here, why you, he broke off, chest rising sharply. Why you made me fall for you. The words struck like lightning. I stumbled back a step, my heart lurching. You don't mean that, I whispered. I do. His voice cracked. God help me, I do. And I can't stand here, night after night, watching you destroy yourself just to keep breathing. If you want me, if you ever wanted me, then give me something real. The room spun. My lies, my fear, my hunger for him, they all collided at once. And for the first time, I let the walls crumble. My name isn't Beaumont, I said, the words trembling out of me. I'm nobody. I grew up in foster homes, in shelters. I've been running since I was 15, from people who wanted to own me, use me, break me. When I heard about the Beaumont's lost heir, I saw a door, a way out, a way to live. The silence that followed was suffocating. I waited for the anger, the betrayal, the disgust. Instead, Ethan stepped closer. His eyes were wet, his jaw tight, but his voice was steady. You think being a Beaumont makes you worth something? He said softly. You think that's what I see when I look at you? I swallowed hard, my throat burning. It's all I have. No, his hand lifted, touched my face, cupping it with a gentleness that broke me. You have me. I didn't realize I was crying until his thumb brushed the tears away. The fire cracked, the night pressed close around us, and for once there were no lies, no masks, no names. Just him, just me. I should hate you, he whispered, leaning so close I could feel his breath. Maybe you do, I whispered back. His lips brushed mine, soft, aching. Not enough. And then he kissed me again. This time it wasn't desperate or furious. It was tender, raw, a promise stitched into every breath. His arms wrapped around me, and I melted, clinging to him as though he were the only solid thing in a world built of smoke. For the first time in years, I wasn't running. But the world doesn't pause for love. The next morning, whispers thickened. His uncle's voice carried down hallways. We'll dig. We'll find out. And when we do, you'll see the truth, Ethan. I tried to keep my head down, to smile, to play the part. But the staff avoided my eyes. Papers shifted across desks. Questions sharpened. By evening, I was cornered in the garden by one of the cousins. His smirk cruel. You know, he murmured. It wouldn't take much to make all this fall apart. One phone call, One file pulled from the wrong drawer. What do you think Ethan will do when he finds out? The words hit harder because part of me feared them. Because Ethan already knew. Because the truth was no longer my weapon, it was my noose. That night, I tried to pack my things. I told myself I'd slip out, vanish again, keep Ethan safe from the wreckage of my lies. But when I opened my door, he was there, leaning against the frame, arms crossed. "Running?" he asked, his voice quiet but sharp. "I have to," I said. "If they find out." "They already will," he cut in. "And I don't care. You should." My throat burned. "This is your life, Ethan. Your family. Your inheritance." His eyes softened, and he stepped closer, pressing a hand to my chest. "And none of it matters if I don't have this." The heat of his palm, the steadiness of his gaze, the rawness of his voice. It tore me apart. "You'll lose everything," I whispered. "Then I'll lose it," he said. "But I won't lose you." And in that moment, I realized Ethan Beaumont wasn't just the heir. He was the boy who would burn down his legacy for love. But love can't shield us from consequences. The uncle moved faster than either of us could. Documents appeared, investigators whispered, and the first cracks in my false identity became undeniable. The walls of the Beaumont mansion echoed with rumors that no lie could smother. And soon, the choice wouldn't be mine. It would be Ethan's. The storm came quietly, in the shape of papers and whispered truths. The uncle had been right. Facts were merciless things. Investigators unearthed the holes I couldn't patch, the lies too fragile to withstand scrutiny. My history, the shelters, the half-vanished trail of a boy who had run too many times. It all surfaced like a corpse dredged from a lake. The Beaumont family sat in the great hall, their faces carved from stone as the evidence spilled across polished mahogany. Birth records, photographs, timelines that didn't match. I stood before them stripped bare. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice shaking but steady enough to carry. "I never wanted to steal. I never wanted your money. I just wanted to breathe, to live, to belong somewhere, even if it was a lie." Silence. And then the uncle, his voice cutting like glass. "Get out." His aunt looked away, tears shining in her eyes but no protest on her lips. The cousins whispered, the staff shifted, and I realized, no matter how much I had pretended, I had never belonged. I turned. I walked. Each step felt like a blade against my ribs. But before I reached the door, Ethan's voice thundered through the hall. "No." Every head turned. Ethan rose, his chair scraping the marble like thunder. His face was pale but his eyes blazed. "He stays." His uncle sneered. "You've lost your mind. He's a fraud." "No," Ethan said, his voice iron. "He's more honest than any of us. At least he never pretended that money or blood made him worthy." "Ethan," his aunt whispered, pleading. But Ethan stepped to my side, his hand finding mine in full view of them all. "I love him." The words cracked the air. The room erupted, gasps, murmurs, fury. But none of it mattered, because in that moment, his hand in mine, I felt freer than I had ever felt in my life. The Beaumont name could not survive scandal. Within days, the estate became a battlefield. Newspapers speculated. Relatives conspired. His uncle threatened disinheritance, disgrace, exile. And Ethan chose me. When I tried to leave, suitcase packed, heart bleeding, he caught me at the gates, breathless from running, his hands gripping my shoulders like the world would end if he let go. "You can't," I said, tears blurring my vision. "You'll lose everything." "Then let me lose it," he whispered fiercely. "Because I found you." And for the first time I believed. We left the mansion behind. The world did not welcome us with open arms. There were stares, whispers, doors closed in our faces. Ethan, stripped of privilege, learned the sting of being no one. I, stripped of lies, learned the weight of being myself. But we had each other. Days bled into weeks. We worked, struggled, built something small but real. Ethan's hands, once soft from wealth, grew rough with labor. My heart, once hardened by survival, softened under his love. And sometimes, when the nights were quiet, when he pulled me close and pressed his forehead to mine, I realized this was what belonging felt like. Not a name, not a mansion, him. Years later, the Beaumont estate still stood, but it was no longer ours, and I no longer cared. Because on a sunlit morning, standing in a tiny apartment with cracked walls but windows full of light, Ethan slipped a ring onto my finger. His hands trembled, his eyes shone, and his voice broke as he whispered, "No more lies, just us, always." And for the first time, I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt like I was home. The world would remember me as a fraud, maybe even a thief. But Ethan remembered me as the boy he loved, the boy who taught him freedom wasn't found in bloodlines or estates, but in the courage to choose love over legacy. And that was enough. Because the truth, the raw, messy, imperfect truth was this: I pretended to be the lost heir to escape. But I found something greater than escape. I found him. And with him, I didn't just survive. I lived. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.